can join in as well.
I'm doing that already.
All right. I want to appreciate the organizers of this event for putting this up and for inviting me to be a part of it. I'm really, really grateful. But just before I start talking, please let me quickly share the flyer and the link so that I don't get distracted while I start talking. So just give me a second. Still here. I want to appreciate the organizers of this event for putting this on and for
All right, sir. So the way we go about this is we need persons to be registered for them to access the Zoom room, but they can join us on YouTube where we have the live streaming and they can still participate in the program. So I'm going to say
Hello, sir. Can you hear me from my end? Hello. I am Mr. Miracle.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I was speaking all along. I don't know if okay. I was muted all this while.
I do not think you were muted. I had an issue from this end. That's why.
Okay. Okay. So let's just go straight into the session. So the topic right there is navigating peer pressure, helping teenagers navigate life. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How many minutes do I have again, sir? How many minutes do I have to speak?
About 45 to 50 minutes, sir.
45 minutes to 50 minutes. Is that what you said?
45 minutes.
All right. Okay. So navigating peer pressure, helping teenagers to navigate through life. And of course, we know that this is a very, very important topic. And we would see how much we can really get to dissect it this morning. It's good, first of all, to start by defining what peer pressure is, even though everybody knows what it is. But just to give you a formal definition, peer pressure means influence from members of a peer group. So where members of people, when we say peer, who's a peer? A peer is anyone who is around the same age bracket with another person, right? So when there is influence, we call it peer influence. When there is influence from one person within the peer group on another person, we call that peer pressure. Now, peer pressure can be positive and it can be negative, right? So a lot of times when people mention peer pressure, we always get to think about the negativity or the negative side of it. So we tell children, don't allow yourself to, don't be subject of peer pressure and all of that. But sometimes peer pressure can be positive. In fact, even we as adults, we get to even peer pressure our colleagues, friends, and what have you, because there is what is called peer mentoring, where, of course, your peer gets to mentor you in certain areas. So we are all products of influences. And of course, when you relate with people, somehow they rub off on you. So even as adults, that happens. So even as children or as teenagers, this is also most likely going to be the case. So peer pressure is not only negative, even though, yeah, we have negative peer pressure where there's a negative influence on one person, on, another person, but it can also be positive, right? What I tell teenagers or young people is that, and maybe even adults, is that you should be a positive peer pressure. You should be a positive peer pressure to say, okay, I want to be, part of those who would influence other people positively. But of course, if what they don't have. So it's important that we realize that, okay, peer pressure can be positive, and we can use that to actually benefit young people around us. The scripture says in Proverbs 32 verse 6, it's a very popular scripture that every one of us know and quote. It says, train up a child in the way to go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Train up a child. Who's a child? A child is anyone who is between the ages of 1 and 18 years old. So he said, train up that child so that when that child becomes an adult at 18, right, he will not depart from the training that you have given him or her. A lot of people do everything to a child apart from training. People do everything. They flog, they shout, they talk, but very few people actually get to train their children. Yeah, training is not shouting, training is not flogging, right? That's not what training is. If I'm to read that scripture another way, I will read it like this. Condition your child in the way that he should go, so that when he's old, he will not depart from that conditioning. I can read that again. I can say, engineer a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from that engineering. That is what it means to train up a child. I don't know anybody here has a condition, but I have a few conditions. Well, I was growing up, my parents, first of all, I actually didn't like to eat swallow. So swallow are things like, so for those of us watching from all over the world, anything that you swallow, food, so that swallow, and any other thing, semo, amala, and what have you. I didn't used to like it while I was a child. I liked other things. Beans was one of my favorites. But then, of course, one major meal in my house was swallow. Was something that was cooked regularly. But then I didn't like it. So it meant that most of the time they would have to look for something else for me to eat and all of that. At the end of the day, my parents started forcing me to eat swallow so that um, I would say I wasn't eating swallow and they would force me. In fact, sometimes with a cane and say, take the swallow, put it inside the soup and put it in your mouth. And that's, I would do that grudgingly. I would cry, but I would take the swallow and put it in the soup, eat anyway, with tears in my eyes, the swallow in my mouth for a long time. Now, guess what? Now I'm an adult. I don't have my parents to flog me anymore or force me to eat swallow. And guess what my best meal is? My best meal right now, my favorite meal is swallow. Now that is conditioning. Of course, it might not be the most healthy conditioning. It's not actually, but it's an example to show you the power of conditioning. Let me tell you another conditioning. Another conditioning I had growing up was the fact that I always ate my meat last. I always ate my meat last based on the conditioning of my parents. So my parents trained us to eat the food first and then eat the meat last. I know some people here have my conditioning, right? So there are people here, right? I'm listening to you are also in the same shoes that I am, right? So I had a conditioning where meat was a reward for eating your food. So you have to eat your food first and eat the meat last as a reward for eating the food. In fact, my dad used to say that it's only thieves that actually eat their meat before eating their food. That's stuck in my brain. So that now I live on my own. I have the capacity to buy one food goat and cook and eat the way I want to. I can have as much as 4 meats in my food if I want. But then, if you give me food right now with protein in it, whether meat or fish or what have you, I would eat the food first before eating the meat. Sometimes, even if the meat was out of 4 or 5, I would say eat the food first without eating the meat. That's a product of conditioning. That is what it means to condition somebody. Now, those are for peripheral things, and those methods of conditioning might not have been healthy. But I'm just trying to tell you that you can condition, can train up a child in the way that he should go, so that when he's old, he will not depart from that training. That's what it means to train. In fact, a lot of the things that we call discipline, discipline is from the word disciple, right? And that is supposed to, and you know what a disciple is? A disciple is a faithful follower of a course, so that in the absence of the visionaire of that course, that faithful loyalist keeps or still is still loyal to the cause of that vision. That is what it means to disciple somebody. That's what it means to train somebody. And that is what it means to train a child. If you train a child here and the child grows up, and then you are still scared about the decisions of the child, after they are 18, then maybe you haven't trained the child well. Just maybe, because parenting is an 18-year curriculum. Parenting is an 18-year curriculum. At age 19, you start seeing your report card of how well you've parented. So if at 18, a child is an adult, at 18, a child should be able to make decisions for themselves. If you still have to make decisions for your child after 18, maybe you didn't do your job well. Yeah. After 18, a child should be able to live anywhere in the world. At age 18 upward, after 18, a child should be able to start a business. And after age 18, a child should be able to get a job. After age 18, a child is supposed to get married if they want to. After age 18, a child is supposed to, take decisions by themselves. If they cannot do all of this, then maybe you haven't trained your child well. Because if a child commits a crime at age 18, he's going to go to jail. He's no longer a child anyway. He's going to go to jail. He's going to face the same realities that face someone who is 75, who is 60, who is 40, and who is 30. That's why parenting is an 18-year curriculum, and the teenage years of a child are very sensitive, except that, even as we'll see when we go on, when you get to the teenage years, a lot of the things that you have done in the earlier years of your child would begin to show from your teenage years. Have you ever tried to see how terrorists are trained at condition? Because really and truly, it seems that the scripture says the children of this world are wiser than the children of light. Wiser. You see how terrorists condition children and make them able to blow themselves. In fact, Proverbs 22 verse 6 can read, condition a child as a positive terrorist, so that when it is time to blow up himself, he will not change his mind. Condition a child as a positive terrorist, so that when it is time to blow up himself, he will not change his mind. Children of terrorists go blow up themselves. The children of this world seem to be wiser than the children of light. Why? Because a lot of them understand these principles. These principles. So, if I get to ask a question right now, to say, which has more influence on a child? Their peer or their parents? And if you're listening to me, I would like us to just take 1 minute to, in the chat box, just tell me, you don't have to explain. Just tell me, who has more influence on a teenager, not a child now, on a teenager? Is it the peer, or the parents? Just tell me what you think in the chat box. Who has more influence in the life of a teenager? Peers or parents? Peers or parents? I would like to see your responses in the chat box. Who has more influence in the life of a teenager? Is it peer or is it parents? Okay, somebody has something there. Somebody say peers, sir. Okay, peers. Okay, beautiful. Usually peers. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. 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 Okay. All right. If you can, please get to invite your friends, your family to be a part of this session in the next few minutes, because the next few things I'll be saying are going to be very powerful, and it will change how you parent, how you train, even if you're not a parent, how you train your younger ones, how if you're a teacher, how you teach your children, how you teach your students, if you're a mentor, how you mentor your mentees. It's going to change a lot for you. Now, thank you very much for your responses, right? Now, let me answer that question from my perspective. So if I was asked that question, which has more influence in the life of a teenager, peer or parent, I would say that it depends on certain factors. Yeah, I know that there have been researches that says that peers have pretty much during teenage years influence, but it could also be parents. So it depends on some factors. Number one is if the parents have done their jobs well at preteen, the age, the period of a child before they become teenager. If they have done their job well as toddlers, children, preteens, if they have done their job well, they will still have a large chunk of influence in the life of a teenager. Yeah. The reason a lot of times teenagers veer off and then, we had more influence with their peers is because a lot of the times parents and caregivers haven't done their job well in the preteen years. If you do your job well in the preteen years, you will still have the ears of your teenager. They will still confide in you. You still have a lot of influence on them. There are a lot of children, for instance, who can't take any major decision in their life without, confiding their parents. Who, their parents are their bodies in that sense. They they roll with their parents. They can, they still have confidence in their parents, and they can still share with their parents because their parents have done a good job preteen yet. So if a parent does a good job preteen, they will still have a large chunk of influence in the life of the teenagers when they become teenagers. The second thing to consider is that teens generally have some leaning towards peers from about 10 to 12 years. So generally, just like a lot of us have said and attested to, when a child begins to get to age 10, 11, 12, 13, they begin to lean a lot towards their peers. They begin to find their identity around their peers, So that leaning can be there. But remember what I said earlier, if your parents are doing a good job preteen, even though they're leaning towards their peers, you will still have their ears. And you will still even have their lips and their mouth, because they will say things to you, and then they will also listen to you. And the third thing to consider is, if you have done your job well as a parent, what would happen? They would choose good friends who would in turn influence them positively. If you have done your job well as a parent, they will most likely, your teenagers, when they begin to lean towards these peers, they will most likely lean towards the positive peers, who would then in turn influence them positively. You see why it's important to do your job well? Because how you train your child determines, the kind of friends they get to choose. They will choose friends ultimately that look like the values you are portraying, like the values you're selling to them. Now, let me share something around what we call conformity. Conformity, right? Conformity is, of course, leaning towards the will and caprices of a group, doing something because everybody's doing it. So it's maybe another way or another word for peer pressure. And a man called Solomon Ash did an experiment in 1951 on conformity. So what he did was that he brought a group of people together, of about maybe 8 people or so, and then he showed them a straight line. Showed them a straight line, and then he brought another set of lines. 2 of those lines were totally, one was shorter, the other one was longer than the previous line he showed them, while one was the same length with the one he showed them earlier. So, but this is an experiment. And of course, in an experiment, you have what is called a control group and the experimental group. So what he did was that out of those 8 people who was used for the experiment, 7 of them were part of the control group. So they knew about the experiment. So he told them what to say as the answer. So he told the 7 people who were part of that experiment that when I ask, I will show you this when we start the experiment. I will show you this line first, and then I will show you a set of lines, 3 other lines. And I will ask you, which of these lines is exactly the same with the previous one I showed you. Now, I want you to pick a line that is different from what I have showed you. So don't pick the line that is similar or that is the same. That is obvious. Pick a line that is longer or one that is shorter. That's what I want you to pick. And 7 of them, put them in that experiment, and just brought a random guy who didn't know about the experiment and put him right there in the experiment. But he asked the 7 people who knew about the experiment to answer first, to see if the responses would affect the response or would influence the response of the last guy. And then he came to experiment and then showed them and said, this is one line, this is a straight line, and this is another set of lines, three lines, right? 3 set of lines. And what I want you to do is to tell me which of these lines is the same with the previous line I showed you. Remember that each of these 3 lines, one of them was the same with the other. The other 2 was obviously shorter, one was obviously shorter, and the other longer. But as they asked them and said, okay, what do you think? The first guy said gave a wrong answer. The line who was longer is the same. The other one said the one who was shorter was the same. And then they all said the wrong answers. Guess what? When it got to the last guy who was supposed to be the real experimental guy, who didn't know about the experiment, he chose the wrong line as well. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. He chose the wrong line as well. Why did he choose the wrong line? Why did he choose the wrong line? He chose the wrong line because of what we call conformity. People want to conform to social norms. People want to conform to social norms. So we want to conform because other people are doing it. So you see a lot of teenagers do things because many other people are doing it, not because it is right. And one of the things that affect, conformity, I'll share some other things that affect conformity. One of the things that affect conformity is the size of the group. Because the people in the experiment were so much, it was just, it was 7 against 1 in that experiment. So it was easy for the guy to conform. That is why it's important that we put the right people around our teenagers, because when the right people are around them and making the right decisions, they will also model that decision to our teenagers. This is what is called the social learning theory, or which hinges on the concept of modeling, to say that even teenagers will learn by what they see other people do, because they want to conform, especially when they think that thing is in vogue, when they think that thing is what is reigning. So you want to make sure that you put the right people around them to model the right things to them. Now, let me share on, okay, I'm looking at time. Should I share? Okay, let me just round off with factors that affect conformity. Let me round off that session. Let me round off the session with that. What are the factors that affect conformity? How people conform to social norms? Because of course there are maybe two types of conformity. We have informational social conformity, informational social influence, and normative social influence. Informative social influence says this focuses our desires as human beings to be correct, right? So that in situations where we feel like we are unsure, in situations where we feel like we don't know what to do, we look to a group of people who we feel know what to do and then conform to whatever it is they are doing or what they are saying. Yeah. So with this type of conformity, it usually involves internalization, when a person accepts the views of the groups and then adopts those views as theirs. Conform. And we see that playing out every day, and that's why as a parent, as a caregiver, you can't be uncertain. You have to, because there are scripts, your children, your teenagers are running by. Many of these scripts were not written by you, they were written by other people. But these scripts still has an effect on your children. So you need to now be intentional about how you are also scripting your children, so that they can also follow a particular script that has a particular destination in mind. Because if they're unsure about what to do, if they are confused, they will look to other people for guidance. And the family is supposed to be the primary social agent or socialization agent that socializes a child on values and beliefs and fundamentals. The second type is normative social influence. This is the idea that suggests that a person conforms because of their need to be accepted. Or to belong to a group. Now, this may be because the group is rewarding, or the group would exclude them or punish them kind of if they don't end up joining the group. So sometimes this might not be, publicly they might identify with the group, privately they might identify with something else. And how is it that a lot of teenagers identify with certain things publicly, but then that is living what we call a pseudo kind of life? You have a public life and a private life. That kind of person, for instance, will be good with pretending. So a teenager, for instance, can come home and then be very good in the house. And then when they go back to school, there's something else. So that you hear news about them and you are wondering, is that my teenager? In fact, you even say it's impossible. That's dual personalities. That's pseudo life. That's double standards. And we have them a lot. I had a parent, recently reach out to me about how their teenager was involved with drugs. And, of course, they wanted help for him. But one of the things that was most shocking for them was that they never expected it. They never expected it. Because they thought this guy was a good guy. This guy, we know him now. When he's at home, he's like this, he's serious, he doesn't. How come? They went to school and they found out that he was involved with drugs and a lot of other things. But they didn't know this guy was living a pseudo kind of life. He was living, a dual life. Well, he was a good boy in school, but he was a good boy at home rather, but it was a gangster in school. So let me round off with factors that affect conformity. One of the factors that affect conformity is self-esteem. When a self-esteem of a teenager, self-esteem, what's self-esteem? Self-esteem is the value you place on yourself. The value that is attached to yourself. When a teenager does not attach so much value on themselves, it is easy for them to conform to what other people say, because they're unsure about themselves, because maybe they don't even like themselves, because there are a lot of teenagers who don't like themselves. They don't like themselves. So if they feel like they don't like themselves, if they feel like they're unsure about themselves, if they feel like they are not good enough, if they don't place so much value on themselves, it's easy for them to actually be lured and be blown away by many winds of doctrine, because they are not sure about themselves. Their self-esteem is low. It is easy for other people to influence them. So they feel like, oh, my breast is not big enough. So when they see somebody else, other people come to tell them, you know what, if you allow a guy to touch your breast, then it will become bigger than it is, because they are not comfortable in their own skin. They're not comfortable with the size of their breast. They would conform to that. They would conform to that. Low self-esteem, it affects conformity. If somebody has a good self-esteem, for instance, no matter what if you come to them and tell them, see, if you're not a big boy, why are you doing like a baby? You're not having sex, you're not sleeping around, then you're not a big boy. If they are sure about themselves, if they are comfortable in their skin, if they have a good sense of worth and a good self-esteem, that would not have any effect on them. In fact, they will tell the other people that, you know what, I don't need to have sex to be a big boy or to be a big girl. In fact, you are the small baby here because you don't understand life. That's what they will tell them, because they have a good self-esteem. When you don't have a good self-esteem, It affects your choices. It affects your behaviors. So if a teenager doesn't have a good self-esteem, it's going to affect how much they will be influenced by peers. So one of the things you want to do is to make sure that you cultivate a good self-esteem in your teenagers. And one of the ways to instill a good self-esteem in teenagers is to give them what we call unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard. What does that mean? Number one, you need to take note of the word unconditional and positive regard, to say that I'm not going to affirm you. I'm not going to love you and give you care based on the things that you do or don't do. I'm going to love you because I'm your parent. I'm going to love you because I'm your caregiver. I'm going to love you because I am, quote unquote, a steward over your life. Because a lot of the times, you know what parents and caregivers do? When a child, come first in school, that's when they take them out. That's when they buy them stuff. But when a child is doing poorly, then what they do is punish them in that sense, or don't do any of that. Yeah, while I get that, you must also understand that if you only do things for the child when they do well, it will send a signal to them that my parents only love me when I get things right. And it would send a signal of conditional love to them. But when they do wrong and you love them, that is true love, because really and truly, you don't really love a person until they do you wrong, and then you are composed in that space, and then you can still love them in spite of the wrong they have done to you. That is the test of your love, the love that you profess. So self-esteem. The second thing that affects, the conformity, how teenagers conform to social norms and to peer pressure, is values. The values of the teenager. The values of the teenager. And of course, values are not just picked from heaven. No, they are actually picked primarily from the home, from the family, because like I said, the family is a primary socialization agent. So the values of the teenager are primarily gotten from the home. If I ask you right now as a parent, did you have what we call family values? Oh, is that the first time you're hearing it? Or have you heard it before and you've never crafted one? Maybe that's something you want to do immediately after this session. There's nothing you pick from this session. Please make sure you do that after this session. Go home and sit down with your spouse and craft out a family values. If you're not married, you have a fiance, go home, write down your family values with your fiance. Let them be values that are guiding your home. Don't leave your children to chance. If you leave your children to chance, then they have no chance. Be deliberate, be intentional. The world is intentional about how they are conditioning people through media, through education, through entertainment, through arts. They are conditioning our children. We can't be lackadaisical. We have to be intentional and strategic and deliberate about how we are also scripting these children. Because if you don't take care of your children, other people will. If you don't train your children, the television will, peers will, the social media will, celebrities will. Because really and truly, a lot of the parents of children and teenagers are not their parents. They're actually celebrities. How do I know? If you tell your child to do something and another celebrity tell them to do something else and they do what the celebrity says, then you're not the parent. The celebrity is the parent. So a lot of teenagers have been parented by celebrities, not their parents. Parents are just figureheads, giving them food and clothing and shelter over their heads, but they are not instilling values. Values is the core of parenting. Values is the core of parenting. If you give your child money, you don't give them values, you have not parented them. Values. What are your family values? To say, okay, what values will this family work by? And of course, values have to feed off from vision. So values cannot be in isolation. So you must have where you're going. And then where you are going will now define who you need to be to get there. That's what we now call values. So vision is a picture of a preferred future. This is where I'm going. This is where I want this family to be, right? Okay, based on this vision of this family being here, what are those things, attributes, characteristics that members of this family need to have in order to get there? So you now say, okay, number one, maybe we need to have discipline. Maybe we need to hard work. We need to work hard. So you put hard work, or maybe we need to be responsible, take responsibility. Maybe we need to be accountable. Maybe we need to be loved. Now, it doesn't just have to be just anything. No, it has to be defined based on your vision. So you don't go and copy and paste and say, oh, I like the values of this family, let's adopt it. No, your family is unique and peculiar. You want to now ask yourself, where do I want my family to be at the end of the day? Then that should now define your values, what your values are. Values. So we talk a lot about value-driven society. A lot of the reason why we're not a value-driven society is because we don't have value-driven families. Because the family is a production factory of the society. So we cannot have value-driven societies where we don't have value-driven families. Because the family is the smallest unit of the society. It's like a cell. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. Organs make up systems. So the family, so the same way you have a nation, a country, or you have the world, and then you have continents, and then you have countries, and then those countries you have states, and those states you have local governments. It's the same way, the family is the smallest unit, but it is the most important unit because it is what gives every other unit of a society raw materials to work with. So everybody in government came from a family. Everybody in religion came from a family. Everybody in education came from a family. Everybody in business came from a family. Everybody in media came from a family. Everybody in arts and entertainment came from a family. So they are all products of a family. So when you see people misbehaving, that is why people would say, where is this guy coming from? Who is their father? Who is their mother? Where are their parents? So it is important that we instill values because values will determine how a child conforms to pressure. If a child is a person of values, for instance, if you have instilled the value of hard work in a child, it's probably that's what we're talking about. Train up a child the way you should go, so that when he's a teenager, he will not depart from it. So that when he's an adult, he will not depart from it. If the value of hard work has been instilled in a child, what would happen is that when other people want to distract him and say, okay, you are even reading too much. Now what for you? Now are you the only one here? Why are you reading like, oh, you don't have a life? Why are you working so hard in school and all of that? They won't be dissuaded. They will still be persuaded in the things they believe in because the parents have done a good job by instilling that value. The third thing that affects conformity is convictions. Convictions is an heightened belief about something. A heightened belief, convictions. Because there are three levels of convictions. The first level of conviction is opinion. The second level of conviction is belief, and the third level of that is now conviction. Three levels of beliefs: opinion, belief, and then conviction. At the level of opinion, there's really nothing backing up that, because that is almost like you planted a tree today and then in another 2 days it can be uprooted. That's opinion. Opinion is usually not backed with facts. Opinions are usually backed with bias, with prejudices. That's what opinion is backed by. That's why they have no strong foundation. And I usually like to tell people, have a lot of opinions. It's good to have a lot of opinions. Have a lot of opinion about anything if possible. But then the next level is belief. Belief is I now have certain information and facts to back up what the opinions I have. To say I don't think this about this, I now have certain facts, figures, statistics, research, and what have you to back up these opinions. That is a level of belief, so that it is no longer something that I'm not sure about, which is opinion, but I'm not sure about it. I know about it. So have a lot of opinions, have many beliefs. But then the next level is conviction. Conviction is having not just facts and figures, but then trying out those facts and figures so that as a result of practice, you have seen that these things work. As a result of the lives of other people, you have seen that these things work. so that your roots are deeply rooted in those beliefs, and then you are firm, and then you cannot change your mind no matter what people tell you. Now have a lot of opinions, have many beliefs, but have few convictions. Have a lot of opinions, have many, you have many beliefs, but have few convictions. And that's what you want to teach your teenagers, to have many opinions, a lot of opinions, many beliefs, but few convictions. Convictions right there, yeah, would have to be few, but a lot of the times I realize that a lot of teenagers don't even have convictions at all. So your teenagers need to have convictions. They have to be convinced about certain things. And this goes back to your values. So they have to be convinced about your values. To say these things, we are going to be convinced about them. If, for instance, in this family you believe in no sex before marriage, then we have to be convinced about them. You have to understand. So when they are deeply rooted, no matter what people say, it won't make change their minds. When they are convinced about being sober, abstaining from drugs, there's nothing people say, because they are convinced, they are rooted. It's not just and like I said, it's not just backed by you shouting and saying, if any man touch you, you'll get beleo. Or say, no, don't just do that, don't do that. No, because when a child gets to teenage years, their cognitive functioning is no longer basic. They are approaching advanced cognitive functioning, and they will ask you a lot of logical questions. If you don't have the answers, my dear, that is why if you're not ready to be a parent, please don't start. One of the duties of a parent is you answer questions, and you have to answer them logically. Your teenagers are not fools, so if you think they are fools, you are just joking. Your teenagers are not fools, they know what they are doing. So if they ask you a question, answer them logically, be intelligent with your answers. Don't answer them like, oh, they are babies. A child cannot ask you something, and then, even from the Bible, a child asks you a question from the Bible, and then they are saying it's only God that knows. When you answer a child that way and say, don't worry, she leave this thing, there are some things we don't understand, leave that in, don't touch it. See, let me tell you, you are deceiving yourself. I've been a teenager before. One of my trademarks, even till now, is curiosity. I always want to know, I want to ask questions. That's how teenagers are built. That's how they are. So if you don't answer satisfactorily, they will still find out. That's why many people who were told, if a man touches you, you get belly, they ended up pregnant, or they ended up sleeping around. So because they now found that a man touched them, they didn't get pregnant. So come on, do your job well, do your homework. As a parent, you are a teacher too. It's not the job description. So a teacher would prepare. If you don't want to study for yourself, study for your children. Don't fall their hands. Study for your children. Be well grounded, so that you can equip them with convictions. And as a round off, I want to talk about what we call schismatic family relationships. And it's another thing that affects conformity. And what is that? When there is a disagreement between a couple about the direction to take, that can impact on how that child gets to relate with the society. Let me explain further. So in the family where you have a father who says, this is what we should do, and then the mother says, this is where we should go, that is a schismatic family relationship. And what would happen is that child would have no values, and the child will look for values outside of the family setting. So you will most likely look for it in peers or society and what have you. And God help you, they don't fall in the wrong hands. Sometimes they can fall in the right hand and then they get something good, but many times they fall in the wrong hands as well. So that's why there has to be unity. That's why there has to be vision. Because what is division? Division is division, right? When there are separate visions in the family, this one is going here, this one is going here. It affects conformity. A child goes out there and then they're not able to make decisions by themselves. They have to rely on what their peers are doing to make decisions because there is no unity in the family. There's no vision. Everybody's not going in the same direction. Daddy says do this, mommy says don't do it. Don't mind him. Don't mind what he's saying. Or mommy says, daddy says, come on, go and sit down. You are affecting the values of that child. They will grow up, they will be unsure about themselves. They will make, or society will make decisions for them. Friends will make decisions for them. They will be indecisive. They'll be faced with temptation. They'll be faced with crossroads. They won't be able to decide. And that's not where you want to be. So round off today, remember what I said earlier, that parenting is an 18-year curriculum. From age 19, you start getting your report card. The teenage years is a year for a period for coaching your children, coaching them to become the best of their kind. So that wherever they find themselves, they will become a one-man army. They'll become a positive peer pressure, helping other people, influencing other people positively. And I've done with many teenagers personally. I have mentees that are teenagers, and for some of them, they are very positive influences. I have a mentee, for instance, in our school. She has influenced. In fact, many times people are doing the wrong things and she's refused to do the wrong things. Because we've talked about it over and over again. I've trained her and all of that. And right now, she's even recruiting people to join her. So they're almost like an army. The more the merrier, the more the easier. They're almost like an army right now, causing a change, disruptive change in their school. That is what you're supposed to do with your teenagers. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to believe with these few points of mine, I've been able to convince you or to confuse you that you can actually train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he is a teenager or an adult, he or she will not depart from it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miracle. We are indeed very grateful for this session. Please, if you don't mind, I was saying that you will pronounce your surname so that I don't do it the wrong way.
I didn't hear that. What did you say, sir?
I said, if you don't mind, I was saying that you will pronounce your surname so that I don't do it the wrong way.
Okay, Ihuoma. Ihuoma is my surname. Ihuoma.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. We are grateful to have you on board this morning for the match series. Participants, you've listened to a lot. I don't know if you have questions. We have the opportunity of raising hands to ask or using the chat room. If there's anyone that wants to ask verbally, you can put up your hand so that I can see you. You can put up your hand in the Zoom. Hello. Yes, anyone? Okay, I think someone just raised hand. Yes. Please go ahead, sir. Dr. Limole.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Miracle. We really enjoy your session. We pray God will help you to do much more. I have a question, particularly around this gender evolutions, gender evolvements that we are having presently around us. Even though in the country presently, I think there are some laws against some form of gender evolvements. I just want to find out, how do we help our teenagers? The world is evolving, there's transgender, there's transabled, and many of those other sort of things that were labeled as mental health issues in the past, but have now been ratified to be part of normalcy. Children read these things on the internet. They are going to come to us with questions also around these things. Please, I just want to find out for our teenagers, how do we help them to make them understand that the sexes are male and female and not all that we have around us today? then I don't want to guide them in the society so that when they see these things, they know where they stand. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for that question. I think it's pretty much the same things that we have shared. Because gender evolution is has a lot to do with identity, right? If a child has mastered his or her identity, then it doesn't matter what they're evolving to. The same way right now, why haven't you, for instance, decided to say you are a woman instead of a man? Because you understand, you know your identity, you are convinced about it. It's a conviction that you have. So if a child or a teenager has been trained and to properly know who they are, identity, and have convictions along those lines, it doesn't matter, let them all the world evolve. They will still maintain who they are. They will still understand that. And one of the things I tell teenagers is that it doesn't matter how many people are doing it. No, the number of people doing it doesn't determine whether it is right or not. So I would say something like, if everybody decides to eat through their nose, does that make it right? They would say no, it doesn't make it right. Because like I said, when you're talking to teenagers, you have to be logical, you have to be intelligent in the way you talk to them. You can't just wish-wash things, or you have to be intelligent. You have to make sure that you're answering them, and they will know. If you answer them shabbily, or you try to evade the question, or they will know, and they might not come back to you again, or they would rather get answers from somewhere else. So I said, for instance, we have about 7 billion people on the face of the earth right now. If 6.9 billion people decide to eat through their nose, does that make it right? Say no, it doesn't make it right. I said, okay, if one person decides to eat through their mouth, does that make it wrong? Or no, it doesn't make it wrong. So what is right, irrespective of how many people are doing it or how many people are not doing it. Yeah, there is the truth and there's a perception of the truth. So you have to teach them the truth, right? And not because a lot of people perceive the truth in different ways. There's right now we are in what we call the post-truth era. The post-truth era says that I will make decisions based on how I feel about the truth or how I feel about a particular thing, and not that thing in itself, or not the truth in itself. So if I feel like I'm a woman right now, you have to respect my decisions of feeling like I'm a woman, right? Irrespective of whether you think I have a penis, that makes me a man or not. Yeah. So that's the post-truth era. And of course, it's still along those lines you tackle it that we have shared. Hope that helps.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Mr. Olusegun, yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Miracle.
Is it just me? His line is breaking.
This morning. Okay. This question is, hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, you did mention pulling out, you did mention some things about low self-esteem in teenagers. Now, how practically do you pull out a teenager who is tending towards low self-esteem or has already drifted into low self-esteem? What are the practical steps you can take?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I have a book on self-esteem, a whole book I've written on self-esteem. You might want to get the book and read and have a holistic idea. The book is about, I think, 7 or 8 chapters. First chapter is what is self-esteem, the 2 types of self-esteem, low self-esteem and high self-esteem, characteristics of them both, the things that affect self-esteem. Talked about the pathological critic, the inner voice that speaks to us. Then spoke about, dealt with low self-esteem, low self-esteem, high self-esteem in itself, and then dealt with how to develop a healthy self-esteem, a whole chapter about 10 principles of how to develop a high self-esteem, in that book. And of course, if you do that, I tell people, if you take one chapter, one one point every day on how to develop a high self-esteem for the next 10 days, you would have developed a high self-esteem. And then the last one is who you are, just talking about who you are, because of course, a lot of us, our self-esteem comes from our identity. And if you don't know who you are, it affects your self-esteem. So you might want to get the book and read it. If the book can be sent to wherever you are, you can reach out to me after the session through the organizers. If it permits me, I can also, give you my direct contact to reach out to me to get the book. So there are also soft copies. If you want to get on Amazon, you can get your other books. You can also get, in those places. But really, to get a teenager from low self-esteem to high self-esteem, it's very possible, and it's something that I've taken time to write about. So you want to go and read that book and glean from the wisdom that book shares. Because low self-esteem have damaging effects on the choices of teenagers and even adults alike, really. And it can really affect them.
All right, thank you so much. All right, thanks so much, Mr. Miracle. We're glad to have you joining us this morning, and thanks everyone. Thanks for coming into the Zoom room for this morning's session. We're going to reconvene again by 7 p.m. But just before we go, I want us to wrap up on this point. A couple of issues have actually been shared that we need to take to heart. And it's very key that this can translate to actions in our families. And it doesn't just stop at the point of we've had, guest speaker has spoken, and then we've added knowledge. It has to translate to action. And for us as faith ministry, it seems that what has been our focus for a while, which is the early years, still coming back to play, that we must begin to do the right thing early for our children if we're really going to help them become who they ought to be. So, starting early enough, you have family values and traditions, things you have put in place. It's important that those things are done early. The children will not have problem relating with what they've done early before they start having much influence in their teenagers. And as I guess you correctly said, conviction. I think I will be stopping at this point, that we need to have a standpoint reference when it comes to issues that are very much defining. We must have a standpoint reference on issues. And I believe that the scriptures, the Bible, can and should be a standpoint reference. That's the final authority that we have on issues. So a child is struggling to wrap his mind around certain things going on in society. There has to be an authority that is administrated and which the child has come to know over the years, that this particular book, the Word of God, is the final authority over you. So when you come into the Bible and you cannot see, or when you look at the interpretation in the scriptures and you cannot get to that point, then it's not valid and does not hold water. So I believe with that, they see so many things, they go around and they come back and they ask questions. If you're able to use the standpoint reference over the years, Bible speaks on so many years of our lives. And even the ones that are not written black and white, by implication, we can get to know answers to those things. With that, the ground is not changing. It's not like they say something else today, they're saying something else today, and they don't have problem sticking to what we've been saying over time, which has even formed our values and traditions. The Lord will help us. And I believe we keep growing, we keep adding value, we keep getting better. We'll stop at this point this morning. Mr. Miracle, we're very glad. We're grateful to have you once again. Thank you so much. This early morning session with us. Thank you so much. We're very grateful on behalf of, yes, sir. on behalf of every one of us at Faith Ministry, we say thank you. So, people, please let's join again by 7 p.m. this evening for another exciting session in this March series. We're still talking about teenagers, parenting teenagers. And I believe we make progress, we add value, and our teenagers will become what they ought to be for God, for themselves, for families, for the society at large. Thanks so much. Let's have a blessed Saturday and do have a great day. Thank you.